A guten Erev Shabbos. The beauty of Judaism, says Rabbi Sachs, is that it's a religion of second chances. We can do great things, we can achieve tremendous accomplishments, even and especially following catastrophe. This is the story of Jewish history. Exiled from our land, we kept the dream of it alive, hanging our harps on the trees and declining to sing the song of Zion in a foreign land, until that itself became a song of Zion. And we returned. Then we were exiled again, this time for 19 centuries, where we never forgot Zion. For 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people never went more than a few hours without mentioning Jerusalem in our prayers, our grace after meals, or an after blessing for a cookie as a midnight snack. And we returned. But the die was cast even before that. In the Parshias, the Torah portions that we've been living in the past few weeks, we learned in great detail about the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which would be our portable, our temporary home and focal point of religious life for decades in our sojourn in the desert and for centuries in the land of Israel. And we built it, as this week's portion of Pekudei shows, in all its detail. Maybe the most important thing for us to remember, or among the most important things, was that all this construction took place in the immediate aftermath of disaster, catastrophe, a devastating loss of the nation's sense of itself and our meaning in life, the idolatry of creating a golden calf and then proceeding to worship it. We have many excuses. It was only a symbol, not a real idol. It was only because we missed Moshe Rabbeinu. That itself was nothing more than a counting error, the last time in Jewish history when our accountants let us down. It really wasn't so widespread. Really only 3,000 people were punished with a capital sentence as a result of the golden calf. Okay, fair enough. But let's not sell it short either. This was right after hearing the commandments in God's own voice. I am God, your God. You should have no other gods before me. And we had another God, and we had it before the real God. We blew it. So why isn't this the end of the story? Why doesn't the Torah and the history of the Jewish people, the story of the Jewish people, end right there with the golden calf? Because there are bigger things at stake. The eternal existence of God's people, for one thing, and for another, the idea of teshuvah, repentance, and salicha, forgiveness. Writ large, that means the idea that failure or disappointment or catastrophe does not doom a person or a nation to a future of despair and hopelessness. There is hope, and there is a way forward, maybe even many ways forward. The Jewish people are builders. This is something that even Pharaoh could figure out. So he put us to work building storage cities for Egypt. That's our skill, but clearly not our destiny. Our destiny was to build the greatest things humans could possibly construct, a dwelling place for God in the physical world. If God is truly without limit or constraint, says the Rashba in a famous responsum, God is not limited to being infinite either. We can, and we have, built a place for God to dwell in the midst of the people, in the midst of the world of physicality. And we did it after the first, arguably the worst setback in our history, worst because it was entirely self-afflicted, the sin of the golden calf. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar, a great Sephardic commentator who lived and taught in Morocco and Italy and lived the last year of his life, which was 1743 in Israel, notices that while we know Betzalel and his work crew built the Mishkan in these parshas that we're reading this time of year, the portion itself, our portion this week of Pekudei, subsequently says, V'ya'asu b'nei Yisrael kechol asher tziva Hashem, that the children of Israel did all that God commanded. Betzalel, the Jewish people. Which one is it? This is teaching us, says the Orach Chaim, that the work a person delegates is also considered as having been accomplished by that person. Shliach Adam k'maisei mamash. A person's agent is just like that person, accomplishing the task. He says that this shows us the profound lesson that underlies V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, Love another as yourself, which we're going to see coming up in a few weeks' time in the middle of the book of Vayikra. Not only love another as yourself, but love another because he is part of yourself. She is part of yourself. No Jew, not the greatest Jew you could think of, can fulfill the entire Torah, all 613 mitzvahs. A Kohen can do only what a Kohen can do. A Levi can't do a Kohen's job, and yet has a different set of responsibilities than the rest of us Israelites. Judges have particular mitzvahs. A king has specific limitations on the scope and reach of kingship, sovereignty. Women can do things that men cannot. We are cooperating, it's very true. And we're talking about something even beyond that, even beyond cooperation. We're one people, and we're really all part of one another. Each Jew, every Jew, helps others become complete. We all support one another. He says, that's why it says, not love Yehudi Acher, a different Jew. It says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love a Jew who you should recognize is a part of your very own self. The Berditchever says that Bezalel's talent, maybe this is why he was chosen for the task of construction, and moreover, why we all gave our national agreement for him to be the contractor for this project on our behalf, is that Bezalel understood how God created the world with words, with various combinations of Aleph, Bet, and Bet, Aleph, and all the others that spell out the verses from creation. Let there be a firmament, let there be waters on the earth, let the grass grow and trees and so forth. Since he was working for us, we're justified maybe in looking over Bezalel's shoulder a little bit and taking a peek at those blueprints that he was working with. Namely, to understand that everything is created out of words, in this case, divine speech. And the same holds true of our world. Everything is created out of words. The most beautiful buildings, the most glorious shuls are just artifacts. They're shells, museums, until someone welcomes you in. Someone tells you what time davening starts, and that's when you should come. Someone invites you to sit next to them. They show you where we are in the siddur. Someone invites you for lunch and a good conversation. What is our community built out of? Words. Words which inspire others and lead to more inspiring words and lead to more inspiring deeds. Even those beautiful buildings like ours, not only built, not only refurbished and renovated, all that comes from words. We ought to have a proper shul. We ought to get together and build a community. And it takes off from there. The good word spreads, and those words spread. The secret of construction, the secret of community, the secret of everything around us is in words. And words endure. Even through disappointment, even through catastrophe, you'll decide, history will decide, if the past 2 years of pandemic was a catastrophe or a setback or a bump in the road. We at Kehillat Sha'arei Torah are casting our vote with the future by holding our first in-person Kiddush in 2 years following davening this Shabbos. We are ready, more than ready, to recover from isolation, from separation, from setback, and begin to recreate our community stronger and more dedicated, more close-knit and supportive after COVID, even than it was before. Spending most of this past week with a room full of rabbis, I have to give you at least a summary of what was on our agenda at this conference. Rabbis from shuls across North America, and even a few from Europe, were there to participate. And much of the conversation focused, as you might expect, on what we can learn, how we can grow, how we can leverage this recent challenging period into growth, development, and improvement for future generations, which in my humble opinion is exactly the right way to think. Among the illustrious rabbis in attendance was our dear friend, Rabbi Beshevkin, who, in case you missed the announcement in our bulletin, just successfully completed his PhD. Now, when Rabbi Beshevkin is with us for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he's usually doing his thing out there in the tent. I'm usually doing my thing in the shul, in the social hall. So I rarely get a chance to hear him very much, except for when I pause on the back steps going downstairs or when we're walking home from shul. But this time I got to hear his whole talk, and wow, all I can say. Here's just one point I'll share with you that I loved. One point that he made. He talked about the need for rabbis to be better communicators, to be willing to innovate with and beyond the traditional sermon or drasha format, to reach people wherever they are. and to use the tools of the time. He happens to use Twitter to get to people whatever it takes. Rabbi Beshevkin quoted a brief statement of Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, classic in its Hasidic brevity and insight. There's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that references the figure of Yiftach, who we know largely from the Haftorah of Chukas. It's chapter 11 of Judges, of Shoftim. Yiftach did not come from illustrious stock lineage, but he rose to leadership in the Jewish people. So the Gemara says, Yiftach bedoro kashmul bedoro, meaning that to his generation, Yiftach was as influential or as significant to his generation as Shmuel, the prophet Samuel, in his generation. Or maybe it means something about the leadership of a generation, that every generation gets the leaders it needs or the leaders that it merits. Rabbi Beshevkin cited this tremendous Reb Tzadok to say simply this: Yiftach is not a person, it's a verb. Yiftach means to open. Yiftach bedoro. Yiftach bedoro simply means that a person in any generation, but you could read it as one who opens, namely one who opens a portal or a point of entry or a doorway in his generation for others to enter, has the greatness and leadership of Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel in his generation. That's what we have to do. Don't leave it all to the rabbis. We don't have that kind of time. We all have to do it. We all have to be Yiftach bedoro. We have to open portals and doors and entryways to welcome in our brothers and sisters into the Jewish community, whatever that takes. So with that in mind, let's all take from the Chazak of this week's conclusion of the book of Exodus to build as Bezalel built on our behalf, and build using words. As often as words can wound and hurt, that's not what they're intended for. They're intended to build community, to build kehila, to build a mishkan, to build a resting place, a place where God feels welcome and wants to rest the divine presence here among us. Let's look forward together and continue to build our beautiful kehillah to be a shining example of openness and welcoming love for all those other parts of us, all the Jews, wherever they come from. May we all together merit to build the much anticipated dwelling place for God's holy presence in Jerusalem, the Bayis Shlishi, amidst peace and good health and limitless joy. Chodesh Tov, Shabbat Shalom.